All right. We will get started. I have a few things to go over and maybe a few more people will join before our presenter starts. But thank you all for coming today. My name is Megan Smith. I am the AAA Wellness Manager. We really just appreciate you being here for our first Wellness Wednesday. We know how valuable your time is, and we just applaud you for taking that time to better your mental and physical health. So I just want to touch on a few things before I introduce our presenter. Please be sure to mute your microphones. It looks like most of you already have. Thank you. Just so we can avoid any background noise. If you do have a question during the presentation, just feel free to message it to the host and we'll answer all of those at the end. And we will be recording this, so we'll email out a link after to the participants along with the clerks and along with a short survey. So today's presentation is about finding balance in your life. And I'm very excited to introduce our presenter, Tiffany Atala. Tiffany resides in San Diego and is a licensed marriage and family therapist with over 17 years of professional experience. She's passionate about helping first responders and their families to improve their lives through wellness therapy and empirical-based trauma treatment. She is a certified clinical trauma professional and a national certified first responder counselor. Her genuine understanding for first responder family life comes from her own experience as she's married to a fire captain and they have 2 children together. So Tiffany is currently the Director of Clinical Development and Training for Shift Wellness, whom the AAA partners with for mental health trainings and our first responder hotline and crisis response. Tiffany now is also a licensed clinician in Idaho and available for on-site crisis counseling. So we're very excited to have her here today. So please join me in welcoming Tiffany Atala.
Hey, thank you, everybody. And thanks for making the time to be here. You know, it's interesting when time is so elusive and a lot of us don't have a lot of it. We're going to be talking about balance and how we can better manage that today so that things feel better in our lives. Excited to talk about it because personally, it's something I struggle with too. So some of you listening right now you've got it all together and you figured this out. And then there's going to be some of us listening that are saying this message is directly for me today. And so I always like to be one who practices what I preach. So every time I start to write another training or do a bunch of research or speak to a large audience, I like to reevaluate where I'm at. So I'm going to encourage you to do the same today. If you've got a pen and paper on standby, excellent. There's going to be points during this where we're just going to kind of do some activities and self-evaluation. And I know it's a short presentation, so we won't have much time to share. I'll also ask that at the end, anybody who has any questions or great thoughts on things, we'll make some time and space for that. So if you want to hold those questions or keep them rolling in, just know that I promise to address them as they come at the end. I am going to share my screen so you guys can see this PowerPoint here in a second. So type. All right, can everybody see okay? I know you guys are muted, so.
Yes, thank you.
Excellent. All right, so what we're looking for is a life worth living, right? One where there's a good balance between doing activities that fill you emotionally and spending time with those they value and work not taking over every part of what you do. So some of you who are going to be listening are self-admitted workaholics, and maybe you're really good at what you do. And so you just do more of what you're good at when things get complicated at home. So we're going to spend a little time and space looking at that today. I am going to encourage all of those of you that are listening that if you're hearing some of this stuff and you're thinking, you know what, it's time for a self-oil change. I really could use getting in, contact the AAA, make sure you get set up to sit down with someone, because it's not that you don't have the answers. It's that hearing out loud the process of your thoughts and the ways that you could deal with different things and the emotions behind them is really powerful. It really helps us come up with some real-time solutions. So just having that right person that's trained to be just a very effective listener and help you on that right path is really important. So, all right, let's roll. I had to put a unicorn picture in here. Those that know me well know I love horses. So here we go. There's my unicorn. Ultimately, we know that balance is super challenging. Some of us go one way where we try to control things in an attempt to keep it all moving smoothly. I'll tell you, every day is quite our juggle as we're a first responder family, and we're trying to figure out who does what. We share the lion's share of the load with home life and grocery shopping and folding and everything else. And I think ultimately we're trying to find a way to manage things so that things don't crash down and fall. It's amazing when I look back at my childhood growing up, we didn't have cell phones, so we weren't receiving, 18 text messages every hour, and things were done in real time, and mail was a real thing. And some of you are taking a walk down memory lane with me. We used to play outside and get lost in our own thoughts. And what we've learned is that our brain is a storytelling brain, which means that when we want to pass on a great family ritual or tradition, we tell the story. And when we're training to promote in a job, we memorize things with acronyms and examples and metaphors and stories. And our brain can do so much healing when we have time for those stories. But unfortunately, when we have too much on our plate, there really isn't much time for us to get lost in our thoughts and in our story and do things that activate that emotion-centered part of the brain that helps us come back to balanced thought and balanced ways of living. So I just want you to keep that in mind today as we start looking at the different portions of our life and the energy we put into things and how good you feel when you're able to kind of be more in thinking through the purpose and the meaning behind things and having time for yourself to do that. All right, so the wellness wheel. Most people are familiar with the wellness wheel. I'm sure you can make up some more components and dimensions of wellness, but from an occupational therapy standpoint, this is what we look at typically, and licensed clinicians will as well. So on this wheel, emotional balance, things that keep you healthy, well, and in check. A lot of times people need to get in and do some overhaul there. Maybe it's just getting some coaching so that you can be more effective with managing a new stage of life, like raising a teenager, or some of you getting married, or any of those transition points. The rest of these on here can get really out of whack when we're overloaded in one area. So for instance, if your finances have been such a stressor for long periods of time, then you may end up working more, in turn having less time for yourself, which often affects you physically, not just on the stress level, but also maybe things like going to the gym or going for a run or walking with friends. Anything that kept you healthy physically goes. Some people would say, those doctor's appointments are pretty low on my scale when I barely have enough time to get kids to and from soccer practice and get the house picked up and make dinner. So I just want you to be thinking about, how does one affect the other? And then as we move forward in this, what kind of changes do I need to make so that this feels better to me? Over the years, I've learned that when I'm out of balance, there's a level of tension I just internally feel. And I'm often looking for ways to get back to that. One of the biggest ways is reevaluating what my priorities are. And so we create our priorities, or we identify things that are important to us, but it really needs to start with, is everything I'm doing in my life related to something that I value? So I want you to take a minute right now and just off the top of your head, write down your core values. For some people, it's integrity, loyalty. I gave a class this morning, we were talking about a similar topic, and people are saying respect is huge. Write down what they are and then put them in order of importance. And you're going to start to analyze, are you living your life in accordance with your values? For some people, it's family first. And yet that tends to be where we take out our negativity or energy, or things aren't going well. So maybe there's that dysfunction. So then you turn yourself towards work, do more of what you're good at, right? Because we like to be doing more of what we're good at and neglecting sometimes what is a struggle. All right. So as we align those values, going through this values clarification, I also want you to look at each of these like a scale. So for instance, if I'm looking at emotional, and if I could be in that top pink zone, meaning I am acing it, I am a 10, I've been doing all the things that make me feel emotionally well, then I would give myself a 10. But I want you to give yourself a real-time grade from 0 to 10, 10 being the best you could be in that area in each of those categories. So you might be saying to yourself, I've been skipping the exercise lately, I'm not eating as well, and I'm due for a doctor's appointment. I can only give myself a 3 for physical. Let's go through and write a number down for each of these. And then sometimes you're going to find there's some big, I'm acing it at work. I'm a 9 right now, but physical, I'm a 3. So you're going to see how wonky this wheel is. And if it was actually a tire, it definitely would not roll. Things that are important to us personally, professionally, and socially help us learn, ultimately help us figure out, how we're going to live in accordance to our life. And every person is super unique into this. So in order for you to find your most a balanced self, we have to first look at what's most important, because to one, it's going to be something, to another, it's going to be a completely different goal. There's other things you could add to this wellness wheel. Okay, it's multidimensional. They may not all be captured here, but these are just to give you some ideas. So physical wellness, that tends to be an obvious one. So as I'm reading these, I want you to look at this and ask yourself, is there 1 or 2 on here that I'm not keeping up with? You might say, you know what, I'm actually doing better about getting some exercise, or I feel better in my own body. I'd give myself a B on nutrition. Maybe we went on a health kick as a family, but you know what? I haven't gone to that dentist in a while. Today, as you leave this class, I'd love for you to write down some real-time SMART goal action plans, whether that means booking 30 minutes in your phone to get on that call, be disconnected 3 times, and finally get an appointment with the dentist. Okay, let's make that stuff happen. This is a quick self-assessment. If you're doing this, almost always give yourself a 2. I just want you to look at an overview of healthy behaviors. For some of you like me, I've got to have my coffee in the morning or it's a no-go. But are we actually falling into having sugary foods partway through the day as the pick me up? And then what we know about that is we're going to crash later. Are we living off of coffee? Okay. Is it to the point where coffee has little to no effect and you're drinking it right before you fall asleep? Are you taking care of other things that would make you feel better inside and out? So intellectual wellness is an interesting one. There's the people that call themselves lifelong learners. And I've always been fascinated with that. I think I admittedly am one of those that I just love to learn things. As a kid, I loved my encyclopedias. I mean, when I got encyclopedias gifted by a grandparent, it was like someone gave me the answers to the universe, and they were expensive. So it was a really big deal in my household. I'm probably dating myself here, but either that or, you could find anything for any book report, right? And I think I realized at that point that I wanted these answers. And kids these days, they can Google anything. They have access to things that we've never had before. So I want you to ask yourself, are you spending some time being creative in your learning? And that doesn't necessarily mean today you're going to get online and go back to get a certificate or go back to school, but I would like you to start thinking about setting some small goals in that. And then the best way that we grow intellectually is actually by teaching. So for those of you that have precepted someone at work, or you're mentoring someone in a new role in your job, you're realizing that actually teaching and sharing helps you be reinvigorated and learn more as well. All right, intellectual wellness assessment. We're not going to go through and calculate all these, but keeping in mind, doing things that are stimulating will keep you alive a lot longer. There is a book called, it's not the Nun Diaries. It'll come to me as we're talking today. And it was actually written about historically about nuns and how they would memorize all of these different Bible verses and be able to do redaction. And the process of doing that kept them from getting Alzheimer's. They found that they had fewer plaques and tangles in their brains because they were constantly stimulating new synaptic connections, which in turn leads to not only memory, right? Memory enhancements of obviously preventing things like Alzheimer's and dementia or helping to do that. But it also led to more flexible thinking because they weren't just learning them, they were actually writing responses to them. So I want to encourage all of us to start to do some things to integrate our learning. For those of you that like to go out and do woodworking, or you're the master craft or YouTube person that can find everything online, that's actually really good for you. And I'm going to encourage you to still do that. Continue. So environmental wellness applies to a lot of things, and I'm going to break it down to be really basic. You ever look around your house and you go, I've been busy lately, and this house does not feel like the way I'd want to live in it. Not only could I not go tomorrow and invite friends over without doing a serious cleanup, but it's definitely not a space that feels relaxing anymore. Sometimes things have happened in our life where we've had traumatic events, we've lost someone, There's been a period of time where you haven't taken care of your space, or it's felt like it needs a change. So when you're doing this evaluation, I really want you to spend 5 or 10 minutes walking around your house and asking yourself, what do these rooms feel like? Does it feel restful to be home? Do I need to make some changes? Maybe I need to take the TV out of the bedroom to get myself back on sleep hygiene, right? Maybe I need to put up a brand new picture on the wall because there was a lot of fighting in that room and we're working on healing. So just think about what that environmental wellness looks like for you. I will find, the other day I was coming and going, I've been flying places, and I was coming and going, and I looked at my flower bed and it was kind of sad. I thought, oh my gosh, those flowers are an example of a garden that needs love. So that tells me it's time to go back to that balance, because if I was more balanced, I would have made space to take care of the things that I care about like that. So let's be evaluating that. All right. Ask yourself, what are some things that you already do well? So we're looking at things that we could change, but maybe there's some activities that you already do that really maintain feeling well in your environment. Okay. Maybe your workspace is really positive. Maybe it's a place that you bring good energy in and you provide each other with appropriate praise. Maybe it's a space where you recognize birthdays. Maybe your home life, you're doing things like put-ups where you're, instead of putting each other down at the dinner table, you're talking about what's right. So let's recognize those today. When we get to questions, please share. Spiritual wellness. Spirituality is different from every single person. And for some of you, it's going to be God. Some of you, it's going to be Buddha. Some is going to be intention in this world. Ultimately, we want to look at, am I involved in things that allow me to feel like there's purpose, there's connection, there's meaning? Ultimately, it's so important. When you have nuggets of this, we tend to find this level of peace, like we're living a life that is worth living, that takes care of others. And when everything is out of whack, we've had so much sadness lately, and I have to speak to, like, everything feels out of whack sometimes in this world. It's amazing how we can feel so down and out, like things have changed. Things are hard. There's mass shootings, there's kids dying by suicide, there's, pain in so many spaces and places. But when we connect with that one other person and we're able to be a conduit to hearing them out, getting them some change, giving them a resource, being there for someone, it's amazing how we start to feel more whole and well and at peace. All right. So yes, man. Anybody a yes man or woman? I love saying yes. I love saying yes. And I watched the movie and I was definitely laughing because it is so hard to say no. But if you continue to say yes, there's no space left. And then ultimately you're left in this state of resentment where it's like, gosh, I can't believe I signed up for this tonight. I love my kids, but I don't really want to be PTA president this year. And we put these expectations on ourselves and they become premeditated resentments. So are you evaluating things right now that maybe it's time to say no to or put on pause? It is absolutely fine for those of you that really struggle to make changes like this to say, you know what? I am in a season of no change. I'm in a season of not making big decisions, selling, buying things, breaking up relationships, doing a remodel, leaving my job. I need a season of peace so I can figure out what is my next best yes, and where are some places I need to employ some boundaries so I can get back to balance. So let's be thinking about those things. And today, as you walk through your day, and tomorrow and this week, I want you to be aware of the times and spaces where it's knee-jerk reaction to say, yes, I got you. I'll totally help you move into your new apartment. And yet at the expense of maybe other things that are important, your family, time. A lot of people will say that money is important and time is more important. We cannot get time back with those that we love. So make sure that you're saying no to things so you aren't left frustrated. Social wellness, that's huge. Having a community of people that connect with those old, good family friends. Sometimes we say, I haven't seen you in 5 years. And then you spend some time with them and you think, wow, spending time with them is like regrounding. It's the old good version of myself. It's a mutual benefit. So make sure that we're investing in others. If you're someone that hasn't been doing much reach out lately and you think about someone like, I should call them, do that again, I should call them, and the days go by, I'm going to encourage you the next time that you think about them, that you just pick up the phone and you make that space, or you send a text and you say, hey, I've got a long ride home tonight. Is it possible for us to have a phone call? Just thinking of you. Other thing you can do if you're feeling kind of lonely or like there's been a lack of connection in your life, it's been so busy maybe, is start doing reach outs. Try doing 3 a day, not asking for anything, not needing anything, but just saying, hey, how you been? Or you've been on my mind, and sending a little quick text message out to those people that are important in your social network. Okay, so how do you define your social network? How do you define this? I think there's a need to help other people. Many of you are in a helping profession in one capacity or another, which is amazing. And there's so much goodness in serving others. However, sometimes it can be at the expense of ourselves. Or your job is one where, like my husband, he works for the fire department. So he's with people 24/7. So sometimes when he gets home, he neglects his social relationships because it may just be one more thing. So let's be premeditated a little bit with this. Let's plan things, time and space to be with those that we care about and invest in that energy in them so we can listen and be present with those that help us feel more balanced in our lives and connected. Emotional wellness is huge. Some of us have so many feelings that shunted them or pushed them down for so long. In fact, you work in a job where nobody's got time for feelings. We're here to help manage the stressors of other people's lives or situations. So over time, we start to lose the ability to even assess how we do feel about things. Or maybe there's just too much negativity coming in. Every time I walk by a TV, there's the news on and one more thing and one more thing and one more thing. And sometimes that stuff is so great in the grand scheme that it can shadow and tarnish having the time and space to feel how you feel about what's going on in your life. Okay. Sometimes you're just trying to cope with the chronic stress of the day, or you've lost someone. You're dealing with grief and traumatic experiences. So I'm going to encourage everybody to book time with themselves. Make a space each day, whether it's 10 minutes, 5 minutes, somewhere, someplace where you're going to do a check-in and say, how do I feel about things? Remember, it's like a fishbowl. We can carry a bunch of different feelings in that bowl at any given time. So it's okay if there's not a lot of clarity and those feelings are transitory and they could shift. Okay. So I'm curious if people think going to therapy means that they're weak. I'm definitely going to ask you this at the end. Okay. As a parent, we really try to teach our children to communicate their needs. And then sometimes we don't even do that ourselves, or we don't do it effectively, or it comes out in haste or anger or frustration. Okay. So as we're learning today and we're continuing to talk about ourselves, it makes us better for our family. The more balanced we are, it means the more flexible we are in our own thinking. And if we're able to be flexible in our thinking, the next time your preteen has some crazy idea of some wacko sleepover that's really dangerous or something you wouldn't allow, it's not that you're going to jump up and say, oh yeah, that's fine, go with it, but you're going to be able to respond instead of react and see things from their eyes too, and have a really healthy response. That goes for relationships and stuff too. So what's financial wellness? This is different for every single person. We've got the people online right now that are phenomenal financial folks. They know there is a label, there is a name on every single dollar they spend each month. And my hat is off to you. And some of you find a lot of relief from it. It's like a level of healthy control, or maybe unhealthy, where you feel good about it. And then oftentimes you marry another person who is completely opposite to you and just wants to have an amount, an ish. I think we're good-ish in this financial arena. And so one person usually takes the reins and manages this, while the other person is just maybe providing some ancillary information. And this can lead to a lot of arguing. So getting on the same page financially is huge, and figuring out when and where we need to have these discussions so that they continue to be productive. Another thing I found is that when couples talk about finances, sometimes the main breadwinner, or the one that brings in more money, tends to hear, okay, I need to work more. Okay, I need to find a way to make more money. Man, I need to promote. I've got to get us out of this situation, when in all actuality, it might be the case that the couple can realign like what's important to them. And there actually might be spaces you could cut back on, or things you could transition that might need another person working part-time. But overall, what does that family life balance look like when we have parents home for more of the time or space? Maybe it's worth making less of that money to afford yourself more time. So these are really important discussions to have. I often say to couples, hey, try to have these at least quarterly, And it might be a high five discussion, like, hey, we're doing so much better than last year. We're finally paying some debt. Or, you know what, we might need to pivot and shift and make some changes in how we're spending this year or where we prioritize things. All right, SMART goals, SMART financial goals. Sit down and kind of look at the things that are, if you're going to set a goal, that it's a specific goal and it's time limited. So it's measurable and it's achievable, and that you come back to how are we doing with this and how do we feel about what we've established for ourselves or for the family. Occupational wellness, how are you doing in your employment? Do you feel like there's purpose in what you're doing at this point? If you don't, what is the path to get to a time and space and place where you do feel purpose and you do feel good about the work you're doing? You know, looking at legitimate leadership, we found that employees feel so valued when their voice is heard. And so that's a two-way communication. Obviously, management is sharing their needs and policy changes and procedures. But when there's a response for employees to be part of the solution and they get feedback again from management, like, yes, we can employ those ideas, or that's going to take some time. It's a two-way conversation. We find that people are a lot happier in their jobs. The other thing is that they're recognized. It's not always about how much money you make, but it's that it matters what you do. It matters that you go the extra mile, that you're not just a number and there's value in you as a person. So some occupational questions or thoughts. Are you happy in your career right now? Or do you feel like that someone's communicated with you a path for growth? Usually there's sort of HR or someone's that a cheerleader that's having these constant conversations. Oftentimes it'll be a leader, your director, your boss, someone who's helping you look at where you could go within the company, especially if they want you to stay there within the agency or department. Are you right now happy with your work-life balance? Maybe the answer is no. What needs to change in that? Is it some conversation that would be good to have with your employer? That conversation probably needs to start with yourself. So sometimes we are people that want to handle and wrangle and do all these things rather than delegate. So maybe the conversation first needs to be with yourself, like, what are some real-time solutions you would propose so that when you come to the table to have this conversation with your employer and you're asking their thoughts and advice, you also have some ideas as well. I love this kinetic chain assessment. Back in the day, I did a lot with working for a fitness company long before being a therapist. And so it's interesting, if you look at the kinetic chain, anybody who's ever been injured, what happens when you throw out like your right hip over in your pelvis area? And then that hip goes out, and maybe that leg is shortened because it's protecting the injury. And then because it's shortened, the way you walk throws off your back, and then it hurts your neck. And then suddenly you can't sleep well at night. And that's kind of how we look at this whole life balance. When one area is out of whack, the whole rest of our life tends to compensate. So we want to continue to do ongoing assessments of these dimensions of wellness. It's amazing how connected they are. I think I've given a couple examples of this. And for some of you, it's going to be leaving this short conversation we're having today and looking at, like, where do I need to have better boundaries, or what do I want to invest in the next 6 months, in the next year? What is causing me stress right now too? So earlier I talked about the wheel and these dimensions, and I said, hey, give yourself a grade. Physical, if you're acing physical, you're the fittest you've ever been, the healthiest, the best nutrition, maybe you give yourself an 8, 9, or 10. So if you gave yourself different grades throughout this wheel, and then you connected the dots and where they would be, 10 would be optimal, like an inflated tire. And obviously a 0 or 1 is very deflated. You would see that our wheels most of the time won't roll. And it's a real good visual for our brain to memorize in our story of like what we want to change. So if we don't make this deliberate, that we look at this at least every 6 months, it's often that we won't take the time to journal what changes need to happen. I'm going to encourage you not only to write short, SMART goals, but to spend the next day or two journaling what would lead to you feeling more satisfied in your life. And when I ask people to do this in therapy, they come back, most of the time they're not saying, if I win $1 million, if I did this. Yes, of course we dream like that. We wish we could rub the genie of the lamp, but ultimately it's, I wish I had more flexibility of my time schedule. I wish that I had a little bit more help with some tasks around the house. Maybe it's the case that we need to employ the kids to help more. Or maybe we need to swap chores in the household, or even have discussions about time, because families, sometimes we'll have one person that stays home for a while with work, but then as time goes on, we've got 2 full-time workers and a huge load at home. So just continue to take this deliberate time and space to go over these things. What gets in the way of balance? Well, wellness is a huge thing. Apologize, I'll go back to that slide. When people are going through huge periods of stress, oftentimes they're dissociating, they're distracting, and they're not tending to the things that are needed. 100% when there's addiction, right? Manana, you're drinking, you're doing other things to numb or cope, and things are not getting taken care of. We definitely fall out of balance. When there's an illness in the family or something where your energy is much lower than normal, and when resources are extremely tapped, especially financial or social, you move to a different zip code and suddenly you don't have any family to help with the children. There's all of these competing priorities at all times. So let's think about your wellness. What do you already do that's healthy? Check that off. Are you someone that takes 5 or 10 minutes in the morning to do a small meditation, some prayer, journaling, to maybe read an article? Are you someone that makes time throughout your week to get a little bit of exercise? I always say you got to get a little bit sweaty sometimes, whether it's a brisk walk or something else, because we want to burn off of some of those negative chemicals like cortisol, because they have impact on the brain. They're toxic for your brain. What can you learn or do differently after today? And are you really ready for some support in your needs, whether it's emotional, financial, or any of these other areas? I love watching TED Talks, but I also want to make some time and space for you guys. So let me check in real quick and we can watch this together. If not, I think we should go. Hold on. Apparently we're watching it. I think we can open it up for some questions and discussion right now too. All right. Oh, good for you. We should have time for one.
What I thought I would do is I would start with a simple request. I'd like all of you to pause for a moment, you wretched weaklings, and take stock of your miserable existence. Now, that was the advice that St. Benedict gave his rather startled followers in the 5th century. And it was the advice that I decided to follow myself when I turned 40. Up until that moment, I had been that classic corporate warrior. I was eating too much, I was drinking too much, I was working too hard, and I was neglecting the family. And I decided that I would try and turn my life around. In particular, I decided I would try to address the thorny issue of work-life balance. So I stepped back from the workforce and I spent a year at home with my wife and 4 young children. But all I learned about work-life balance from that year was that I found it quite easy to balance work and life when I didn't have any work. Not a very useful skill, especially when the money runs out. So I went back to work, and I've spent the 7 years since struggling with, studying, and writing about work-life balance. I have 4 observations I'd like to share with you today. The first is, if society is to make any progress on this issue, we need an honest debate. But the trouble is, so many people talk so much rubbish about work-life balance. All the discussions about flexi time or dress down Fridays or paternity leave only serve to mask the core issue, which is that certain job and career choices are fundamentally incompatible with being meaningfully engaged on a day-to-day basis with a young family. Now, the first step in solving any problem is acknowledging the reality of the situation you're in. And the reality of the society that we're in is there are thousands and thousands of people out there leading lives of quiet, screaming desperation, where they work long, hard hours at jobs they hate to enable them to buy things they don't need to impress people they don't like. It's my contention that going to work on a Friday in jeans and T-shirt isn't really getting to the nub of the issue. The second observation I'd like to make is we need to face the truth that governments and corporations aren't going to solve this issue for us. We should stop looking outside. It's up to us as individuals to take control and responsibility for the type of lives that we want to lead. If you don't design your life, someone else will design it for you, and you may just not like their idea of balance. It's particularly important, this isn't on the World Wide Web, is it? I'm about to get fired. It's particularly important that you never put the quality of your life in the hands of a commercial corporation. Now, I'm not talking here just about the bad companies, the abattoirs of the human soul, as I call them. I'm talking about all companies, because commercial companies are inherently designed to get as much out of you as they can get away with. It's in their nature, it's in their DNA, it's what they do, even the good, well-intentioned companies. On the one hand, putting childcare facilities in the workplace is wonderful and enlightened. On the other hand, it's a nightmare that just means you spend more time at the bloody office. We have to be responsible for setting and enforcing the boundaries that we want in our life. Third observation is we have to be careful with the time frame that we choose upon which to judge our balance. Before I went back to work after my year at home, I sat down and I wrote out a detailed step-by-step description of the ideal balanced day that I aspired to. And it went like this. Wake up well rested after a good night's sleep. Have sex. Walk the dog. Have breakfast with my wife and children. Have sex again. Drive the kids to school on the way to the office. Do 3 hours work. Play sport with a friend at lunchtime. Do another 3 hours work. Meet some mates in the pub for an early evening drink. Drive home for dinner with my wife and kids. Meditate for half an hour. Have sex. Walk the dog. Have sex again. Go to bed. How often do you think I had that day? We need to be realistic. You can't do it all in one day. We need to elongate the time frame upon which we judge the balance in our life, but we need to elongate it without falling into the trap of the I'll have a life when I retire. When my kids have left home, when my wife has divorced me, my health is failing, I've got no mates or interests left. A day is too short, after I retire is too long. There's got to be a middle way. A fourth observation, we need to approach balance in a balanced way. A friend came to see me last year, and she doesn't mind me telling the story. A friend came to see me last year and said, Nigel, I've read your book and I realised that my life is completely out of balance. It's totally dominated by work. I work 10 hours a day, I commute 2 hours a day. All my relationships have failed. There's nothing in my life apart from my work. So I've decided to get a grip and sort it out. So I've joined a gym. Now, I don't mean to mock, but being a fit 10-hour-a-day office rat isn't more balanced, it's more fit. Lovely, though physical exercise maybe. There are other parts to life. There's the intellectual side, there's the emotional side, there's the spiritual side. And to be balanced, I believe we have to attend to all of those areas, not just do 50 stomach crunches. Now, that can be daunting because people say, bloody hell, mate, I haven't got time to get fit. You want me to go to church and call my mother? And I understand, I truly understand how that can be daunting. But an incident that happened a couple of years ago gave me a new perspective. My wife, who is somewhere in the audience today, called me up at the office and said, Nigel, you need to pick our younger son up, Harry, from school. She had to be somewhere else with the other 3 children for that evening. So I left work an hour early that afternoon and picked Harry up at the school gates. We walked down to the local park, messed around on the swings, played some silly games. I then walked him up the hill to the local cafe and we shared a pizza for tea. Then walked down the hill to our home and I gave him his bath and put him in his Batman pajamas. I then read him a chapter of Roald Dahl's James and the Giant Peach. I then put him to bed, tucked him in, gave him a kiss on his forehead and said, good night, mate, and walked out of his bedroom. As I was walking out of his bedroom, he said, Dad, I went, yes, mate. He went, Dad, this has been the best day of my life, ever. I hadn't done anything. Hadn't taken him to Disney World or bought him a PlayStation. Now, my point is, the small things matter. Being more balanced doesn't mean dramatic upheaval in your life. With the smallest investment in the right places, you can radically transform the quality of your relationships and the quality of your life. Moreover, I think it can transform society. Because if enough people do it, we can change society's definition of success away from the moronically simplistic notion that the person with the most money when he dies wins, to a more thoughtful and balanced definition of what a life well lived looks like. And that, I think, is an idea worth spreading.
Okay. I think I'm back with you all. So what do you guys think about that video? Did it bring anything up for you? And please feel free to unmute yourself and talk at this point. We're all so quiet. If anybody is talking, you do have to unmute. So I showed that because when I was looking through YouTube at different videos, and I like watching TED Talks, I found that he really epitomized the idea that it's not always about the money. It's about those moments that are worth so much more. And you know, the saddest thing is when we think about the conversation we often have is like, if I were on my deathbed, would I ever regret not working more? Would I ever regret not making more money? Most of the time, people's answer is no. It's the time that I wish I'd spent with certain people, connecting. And I think a lot of this comes back to connection, whether it's connection with yourself and taking that time to get to know you, because we're always evolving and changing. We're growing, we're developing. Or whether it's connecting with those that we love so much. I loved how he said putting him in his Batman pajamas and getting a pizza, just basic stuff. But he had gotten off work early that day and made a commitment to be present. And I also think about what would that experience have looked like for his son if he'd been on his phone the whole time? What had that experience been like if he had been slightly engaged, but also disengaged? And if any of you relate to this, have you had times where you made time and space to be with your kids, your teenagers, your family, people in town, and this thing called the phone is also ever present as a visitor in those visits? And how has that impacted the experience for you versus when you can be completely invested in that time and that space, that energy? So I just put that out there for anybody to think about. Those of you listening, did you take away anything today? If so, kind of what came to mind? You're so quiet. Okay. So one last thought I want to leave you all with is on boundaries. When you change your behavior, people aren't always going to like it. And oftentimes it feels really good to do more and be someone that's able to get things done. And I'm never going to say, stop being productive. Let's have a whole conversation about living in balance. And then we're just going to go home and shut it down. It's kind of the opposite of that when we talked about saying yes to certain things and then being judicious about what we say no to and where we spend our time. So as you start to implement boundaries in your life, maybe it's a cutoff time where at dinner, the phone goes away. And whatever your dinner time is, 6 to 7, you don't take those calls unless you're on call. Other people that are used to always having easy access to you are going to get frustrated with that potentially. And so rather than us being able to change them, we can't. I think clearly front loading and communicating the way that you're going to change your MO of operating is really important. I have one of the bosses that I work with, and he's awesome. And he's really good about his family life balances. In fact, he's been influential for me because I know that when he's home with his family, unless the world is burning down, I can send an email to address it tomorrow. I do not need to interrupt that time. And so by him modeling that and being the law of the picture, we think about 21 Laws of Leadership, those who have read that book, the law of the picture is really demonstrating that behavior for us and then other people learning from it. And so I think about that too as a healthy person. I want you to also take note of those in your life that you think have a really good balance and what are they doing so right? What are some things that you want to implement or learn from them? And it's easy to see how no, things can't change. And sometimes it's hard to have that flexibility of thought on ways we can make those changes. So I encourage you all as we kind of step forward to not just get off this Zoom today, but to take a couple extra minutes as we come to a close to write down some of the things that you are going to do and to look back at those 8 dimensions of the wheel and just pick one next best step. Something small, consistent change adds up to great developments. So I just want you to keep that in mind. And so I vow today as I'm getting, coming to a close on this Zoom, that one of the things that I'm going to do, I'm going to start packing my lunch and I'm just going to pack things I have in the house, but I'm going to be proactive and actually thinking about like, what are some things throughout the week that I'd like to eat or doing some prepping of food so I have better options too, because it's just one thing that will make me feel better and fuel me throughout my workday. All right, so I will open it up one more time. I don't see anybody in the chat, Julie or anybody else, any questions coming up or thoughts?
No questions in the chat.
Okay. Megan, anything as we come to close?
I don't think so. Thank you all for being here today. You're welcome to email me if you have any questions or thoughts after, and I can get them to Tiffany. We appreciate your time, and we hope to see you at our next Wellness Wednesday on June 15th. We'll be talking about nutrition on the go. So thank you so much, Tiffany, for everything today. That was
Appreciate
great.
you all. Have a good day. Be safe too.
All right. Take care.